when I was working on campus, he said, do you think if I pinned you up against the wall right now that you could stop me? And I was like, no, I don't think I could. But he would say things like that to kind of be like, you want me to do this, don't you? Like, this is what you want. And again, having never been pursued, spiritually, emotionally, sexually, it was just like this big whirlwind of confusion. And hi, my name is Camryn, and I was abused by a church leader.
Did you grow up in the church?
Yes, I grew up in the church with my mom and my dad. They took us to church, but they didn't really disciple us all too much, but were faithful to take us to church every week.
What? How would you say you view the church?
How I view the church today,
Yeah.
I view the church as a place that needs a lot more of the face of God and the Holy Spirit and a lot less legalism.
Tell me about how the abuse started.
Yeah, I had gotten my dream job, and everyone that ever knew me, every person I'd ever discipled was so excited for me. And when I got on the first day of the job, I just was paid a little extra special attention to. I started getting private messages online, started getting text messages on the weekends. And I thought, oh, well, I think this person's just being friendly. Sometimes I would even show my mom the messages and be like, oh, like, look what he said. And she's like, oh, it's kind of funny. But in the back of my mind, thinking, I do feel like it's a little weird, but I'm going to believe the best because that's what you're supposed to do about the people that are, caring for you and that are in leadership above you. So started with private messages, and then um, the biggest part I would say is I would go and have meetings off campus with students, and he would come and meet me kind of in between those meetings and just to work with me. But really, he would just be asking me really intentional questions about my life and really harped on my singleness and having never dated anybody.
Is it hard to talk about this?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can
a little
imagine.
shaky.
Yeah. Um, how have how have you processed? We'll get into some of the details, but how have you processed all of this? Is how long has it been?
Yeah, it's been 3 years. The first year after the abuse, I think I spent the majority of the time thinking this was a person who just made a bad decision. And I think a lot of people told me to believe that it was just kind of random and not that it was an abuse, basically. And so, again, I wanted to believe the best and also think that, oh, this person cared for me and they just made a really bad decision. I've come to learn that it's a lot more common than I ever knew, and it's usually the same things that happen and in the similar types of environments. And so, yeah, it took me a year to realize what had really happened. And once I heard other women's stories, I started sobbing in my room. I could not believe how textbook everything was, even down to the age gap being 13 years is the most common age gap between the pastor and the woman under their care. And so I think that's when the rose colored glasses came off, and I realized, man, I'm not alone, and this is not my fault. God made us to be loved and cared for and pursued and to respond to that. And when it's done by a leader, it really is confusing. Like, is this what God wants? Is this how did God plan this? So I think I process a little bit more every day, but thankfully I had the help of an expert in clergy abuse that lives in Waco, Texas. And when I found out that the leader of all clergy abuse that has been studied up on this for over a decade, world's leading expert, lived in my town, I couldn't believe that I could seek his opinion and his help.
So, yeah, can you kind of just walk me through the timeline, like how old you were, um, and how it kind of transpired, the events, and then leading to the end of it?
Yeah. So I was 25 when it started, and I think to begin with, that was like just a common misconception. A 25-year-old can make her own decisions. A 25-year-old can seek help, can just be fully functioning, and just, you know, isn't a victim in any way. So, yeah, I was 25 and had never dated anyone. I think that's a really key piece. I was very insecure about that. I was very lonely in a lot of ways, and used the good work I was doing in ministry to fulfill those lonely parts, because I was helping so many people. I was doing good work for God. Yeah, and then, yeah, I mean, it just, again, it started with the messages. And then during those meetings, kind of off or on campus, but off of my church campus, you know, he would put his hand on top of mine, and I would like pull it away, and he would ask to give me like a hug goodbye. And then he would try to like get closer and closer to me, and I would turn my face saying, I can't do that. And he just would not take no for an answer. And he really let me in on his family's lives. He talked about his wife and his kids, and would even come to work the next day being like, man, my kids really, they need you in their lives. Like, you're such a great role model for them. Will you actually pray for my marriage? It's kind of struggling right now. And I didn't know what kind of his plan or not plan was. So I just was trying to be like empathetic and respond and say, of course, like I can pray. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Like, thank you. I think I was made to feel extremely special in a lot of ways. I would have handwritten notes that were left on my desk or in my Bible. Yeah, I was just paid attention to, and I was seen. Yeah, and I think the boundaries kept kind of breaking slowly. And so I would say, hey, maybe you shouldn't call me after 5 p.m. I don't think that's super honoring to your wife, and I just think that that's a little weird. But if you have a specific question, no problem. You can contact me. And he's like, you're being ridiculous. You need to show me more grace. And then, you know, these like the spiritual language that was used, I think, was difficult. And so I think I started on staff in the summer at 25, and then probably about a month or so in, kind of after these slow grooming things that would happen, he sat me down at the end of a work day. The day prior, he had he and some coworkers had really hurt my feelings, and I kind of just let them know, like, hey, you guys hurt my feelings. Like, I'm a little teary, but I'm gonna be fine. And they apologized, but he kept coming up to me 3 or 4 times after that, being like, I'm so sorry I hurt you. I just can't believe I hurt you. And I'm like, it's all good. I just wanted to let you know that that kind of hit a sore spot for me. And then the next day, he asked if he could meet me kind of towards the end of the workday. So we met at a coffee shop, still in the work hours, but kind of lingered on after hours. And he just sat me down and he said, hey, if I would have met you 13, 15 years ago, you would have been the one I would have married. Like, God would have been, like, he's the one that, like, he had me for him. You know, and I had some people say, hey, I could see you with somebody like him one day, you know, and I've admired plenty of my friends, you know, husbands and just qualities in them, but something like this I could have never even thought would happen. And so when he said that, I think I'm a pretty logical person. I'm like, hey, like, I don't know what you're saying, but I think you're just like confused, you know, me as a 25-year-old having to really convey to an almost 40-year-old, like, hey, like, God didn't make a mistake when you got married. Like, there's so much value in like I don't know what you're saying. And he just was like, you're the love of my life. I've never met anyone like you, but this isn't sexual at all. I just love the way that you move people towards Jesus. And we make such a good team. Like, we're the team to be. Like, we should be the ones ministering to people, not these people, you know. And that was like my greatest goal and desire in life, was to just share the gospel with people. And to me at the time, everyone loved this person, and he was what our head pastor described him as magical. our head pastor had said, hey, when he is, because he's big, tall, presence, and he said, man, when he's warm and he's kind, it is a magical experience. And that's kind of, I mean, what he described perfectly and what I experienced. This kind of scary presence when he was super intentional, it really draws you in. And so I think I was drawn in just like day after day. And I wasn't like at that meeting when he told me I was the love of his life. I wasn't like, you're the love of my life too. I just kept being like, hey, like we can figure this out. Like I don't really know what you're saying, but I feel like you're gonna figure it out. And so I mean, I was freaked out. I went and told my roommate the next day and was like, but don't tell anyone because I think he's just going through something. I didn't want someone to lose their job. And, I think knowing that what if I lose my job? I had just gotten this dream job. I just got here. I just couldn't have, again, even imagined what would have happened. And so, yeah, that happened about after a month. And then, yeah, again, the boundaries just started slowly breaking down. And then he would ask to meet me at different times of the day and different times of the night and just to have a conversation. And then from there, he really just took on the role as being a love expert. And he would keep telling me, um, man, what we have naturally, people who've been married for 10, 20 years, they don't even have what we have. Like, this is something you like can't make up. And he would always say the phrase, don't you think it's better to have loved and to have lost than never to have loved at all? Because he really wanted to push a physical boundary there. And I didn't kiss anyone since I was 18. And I was even dead set on, I'm not even going to kiss people in dating because I've seen what it had done to some of my friends and the boundaries that they had crossed. And I didn't want to carry that sexual shame. Um, and so he would say that day after day. He would buy me gifts. Again, he would leave things on my desk. And yeah, and the first day I got to the church, he said, hey, I'm going to put you in my back pocket. Whatever you do, like, I'm going to be with you. Like, I'm going to get you to where you want to go. And so being an athlete my whole life, I was like, man, this guy is like a coach. He's going to make my ministry dreams come true. And so probably about after 2 months, I just kind of stopped fighting. I just feel like I didn't have anything left in me. I think people can either have a flight, fight, or a fawn response. And I had the fawn response, which is just kind of go all in. And, that's when kissing started happening. And I just was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to fight this anymore. I'm just going to let this happen. Because as soon as you let something happen, you're now an equal participant in this. It felt like. So now it felt like I had nothing to do. I couldn't get out of this in any way because I would lose my job. I would lose everything I wanted. He would have lost his job. And so, yeah, once it turned physical, I felt like was the point of no return. And then the shame from there on out just ate me alive. Every single day I was suicidal, depressed. My best friends thought I had an eating disorder because I was getting really thin. My face was breaking out so much because it was just daily stress. I had people at work saying, man, are you okay? And I would just make up a lie being like, yeah, I just had a fight with my family, like no worries, because they could just see the distress on my face and kind of the toll it was taking on me, which I think maybe a lot of people thought, man, when they found out afterward, I think they thought this was some giant love story gone wrong. When no, I had asked him like, hey, this is not the way of God. I don't understand. This is not what he has for us. And he wanted to be together, like actually out in the real world. And I said, I want to preach the gospel the rest of my life. What would we have to stand on? This is not real. And he just was kind of like, you don't know what you're talking about. And people would love us out in the real world. We would be, again, the ministry team to beat. And he's like, well, I can't stop myself. So you're going to have to figure this out on your own. And so he just kept using forceful language. And I remember one time even he said, when I was working on campus, he said, do you think if I I pinned you up against the wall right now that you could stop me. And I was like, no, I don't think I could. But he would say things like that to kind of be like, you want me to do this, don't you? Like, this is what you want. And again, having never been pursued, spiritually, emotionally, sexually, it was just like this big whirlwind of confusion and me trying to make excuses for what this person was doing. And one day I even said, hey, can we just, again, no contact. And so we're going to go 3 days, no contact. And on the end of the second day, he calls me crying. And it's just like, I can't not talk to you. Like, I need to see you. Like, I saw something in my kitchen and I thought of you, and I just can't do this. And I just felt like it was a never ending cycle of, hey, please respect this. And then him being like, I don't have the capability. So figure it out.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned just like earlier, there was always a desire of yours to be married. You're single, you've been single, never really in a serious relationship. Um, how did that deep God-given desire um, play into this and in a way enable it to go forward?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really do think it was the key piece that made me so susceptible to. I don't think I could have spotted, even if I had been in a serious relationship or multiple, I don't think I still would have spotted the grooming patterns, because that's what grooming is. It's slowly over time. But yeah, I mean, I think I would always say my two biggest desires and goals in life are to be in ministry and to be married. And I felt like through this abuse and at the end of it all and today, I felt like those dreams were taken out in one blow. And so I think continually my mind was being warped on, this is what pursuit looks like. This is the kind of stuff you, in a sense, see in the movies. People who won't take no for an answer, who will get you no matter the cost, and who are almost like obsessed with you in a way, which is and if it's in a healthy relationship, these are things that you want. And so I think it was really hard to differentiate kind of what is real and what is not. And I think even now, seeing my friends in relationships and hearing them talk about some things, I have a lot of triggers that come up, and I'm like, oh, that same thing happened to me, but in a horrible context. And so it feels completely tainted in every sense. But yeah, I think I grew up, I think, again, with the singleness and kind of just the way I grew up, there was a lot of ups and downs, like in my home. I grew up in a really lovely home, honestly, but I mean, like anyone, there's lots of ups and downs. And I think having that and being a little unstable kind of throughout my life in that way, I think I was looking for a safe place to land. And as I've had therapists and psychiatrists explain it to me, you were looking for a safe place to land, and somebody came to you offering a safe space, but they were, a wolf in sheep's clothing. So I think that the way I grew up and singleness really altogether made that the perfect spot for me to just receive whatever this person could give me, because I just was so, I don't want to use the word desperate, but I guess I can, desperate to experience that. Because most of my friends are married and have kids, and any person I've ever discipled to know God, they got to go be moms and wives. And so it would always feel like, well, when's it going to be my turn? And I even have a brother who was my pastor, same age, same amount of kids as my brother, and my brother is out of our lives. And he has run away from our family and wants nothing to do with us. And so I think also my pastor would use language like, oh, like maybe this is how I'm going to get like kids back in my life. Like I will have these kids, like these 5 kids will be my 5 kids. Or it's almost like in some weird way he was like replacing that missing piece of like my family. And so I think there's a lot of disillusionment in that.
Yeah. You talked about earlier when you kind of finally just gave in to the advances. Um, why do you think, looking back, that you didn't just go tell everybody this is what's happening, or even say the first time you kiss? What kept you from saying to all of your friends, "Hey, this just happened here," so that it would stop there?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, I think there's a few different answers. I think one, I didn't really understand fully what was happening, or what it would entail in the future and how far it would get. Um, I think the biggest reason is, and I think this is honestly true for whether you're a victim of abuse or whether you're a leader struggling with pornography in the church or whatever it could be. If you have this thing that happens, likely if you share with people, you're losing not just your immediate job, but probably your livelihood for a while, because you're going to have to go and heal and do all these things in order to get well. And you're probably not going to be let back into your trusted position. So I think it keeps people quiet a lot longer and they struggle in silence. And I think that that was in part, at least true for me. But I think mainly just shame was so present. And I mean, almost weekly in my journal, because I would pray to God every day in my journal, being like, God, I don't understand why this is happening. Like, surely this is not the person like you have for me in this way. This doesn't make any sense. Um, and I would ask God to like end my life every day, because in my mind, the only ways out were either I die or I quit and I just move across the country. For some reason in my mind, it was, I never thought I could just utter the words out of my mouth, because I felt like, man, the entire church's belief in God is on my shoulders now. I felt like, I just kept thinking of every person I've ever led to Christ. And man, I know people who have stopped believing in God because of wrongdoing in the church or being betrayed by Christians. And that's the last thing that I wanted to happen. So I felt like in order to keep it, yeah, to keep people's faith alive, it was better for me to suffer in silence than to get out of it. So
It's a pretty powerful statement you just said about suffering in silence. I've experienced that a lot with shame. Now looking back after it's been 3 years, um, what would you say was like, if you could sum up that whole situation in one lie that you began to believe, what was that lie?
I'll answer that in two parts. I think the immediate lie that I'd always believed because of just a circumstantial issue was, again, my friends were all getting married and I was not. That felt like, obviously there's lots of single people in the world my age, but because of my small circle, it felt like I was isolated. And from a pretty young age, I would say I believed I would never be married. I would never have love and I would never be married. And so I think that's the like small lie. But I think the bigger lie that would come from that is that God doesn't have my best interest in mind and that he wants me to suffer. I think for me in the church, when I read about suffering in the Bible and what all the disciples had to go through, my sufferings felt very small compared to people dying for their faith or for whatever the reason was in the scriptures. I thought, man, my life feels just insignificant compared to these disciples. And so I think my framework for how God was, oh, it's being an athlete. I'm going to tear my ACL, or my parents are going to die in a car crash, or I'm never going to get married. These things will keep me dependent on God. And this will be what his plan is for me, because it'll keep me like eyes on him. So I think that's the bigger lie.
So what would you say is the truth now?
Yeah, I think now more than ever before, I really do believe that God God's plan isn't for my downfall or my ultimate suffering. Suffering will happen, but I don't believe that God is throwing wrenches in my path just as a game or a toy. I think I had a really mixed view of that. So I think the truth is that God has good plans for me. He's going to make me lie down in green pastures, and He will protect me, and that only goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life.
Mhm. Um, help help those process who can't really fathom the idea of abuse and would say like, you're legally an adult, you have the choices to make. How is this not just a classic affair case?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that one of the biggest reasons that the difference between an affair and abuse in these contexts, whether you're 19 or whether you're 35 and this happens to you, is that whenever there's someone kind of in you're under their care, it's always the person with the more power. It's their responsibility to protect and to like remain boundaries, and to keep those. And so I think whenever there's a power differential, it's never safe to say yes or no. If you can lose your job or your status, you don't really have the ability to make that decision without coercion. And so I think even in a non-spiritual context, you can see manipulation like a boss, and someone under their cares. But I think when you add in those dynamics plus a spiritual context, it really is. And when you're using spiritual language to defend an evil action, I think that makes it really confusing. But most people that have gone through affairs, and because I talked to women who had gone through affairs, and I never would relate really with what they were saying. It was very confusing to me because that's kind of the story that was told back to me. Like, this is what you went through. And then I would hear these stories and think, this does not feel the same to me. But then, before I really understood what had happened to me and had the language, I would talk to women who'd been in abusive marriages and relationships, and the level of just intensity and persistence that their partner carried, and how they felt stuck. I was like, wow, I really relate to these people. But I would say that the people that have been through affairs don't carry PTSD, like people do when they come out of clergy abuse.
Yeah. Um, that's heavy. Um, let's go back to the shame piece. You talked about how once shame came in, that's when it like really started to go downhill fast. Because you talked about how there was a lot of, advances and like flirtatious behavior. And do you remember the moment throughout the process where that shame really hit?
Yeah, I would say it hit its worst point right before it ended in February. I think, I mean, I had felt like I had relatively been pure for a while, or in my mind, what I considered pure. And then just looking in the mirror and thinking, I can't even look at myself in the mirror. I'm disgusted with my face and with my body. And I looked at him at one point and I said, if we were actually dating in a Christian context, you would not be allowed to touch me. I'm like, what are you doing? What is this? Because this is not okay. And I just broke down and was like, I cannot do this anymore. I just felt so utterly sick to my stomach. I mean, regardless of what relationship type of good or bad that you're in a Christian setting or probably any setting, that sexual shame is gonna creep up on you. But yeah, I would say it really didn't hit me super hard until the end. And then I think you start thinking, man, what does this say about me? Like, what do I believe about myself that I would allow this to happen? And I think both things can be true that, man, I have some negative beliefs about myself and my worth. And again, I also, this is not my fault. And I did the best I could with the tools I had in my tool belt at the time, having never experienced or even heard of something like this. And I tried in different ways to escape it. And kind of each one hit a wall, And so I think it's like, yes, I was trapped. And also, I believed some things about myself and what I'm worth. At the time, I genuinely believed I'm lucky to experience this type of gross love because this is as good as it's gonna get. This is all I'm ever gonna experience, so I just have to get it now while I can.
Yeah. Like, there's obviously an enemy out there who doesn't want you to live the life that God has for you. What do you think his scheme was? I mean, you kind of just mentioned it about how this really twisted version of love was God's best for you. Um, do you think that was his like scheme all along? Was to kind of pinpoint what you really desire, a God-given desire, and then bring this false version of it and get you to take the bait on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely one of the key pieces, and I think also the enemy really attached onto my unhealthy view of leaders and leadership. I think that also kept me stuck in it for a really long time. I used to be someone that would promote my pastor's books and invite people to anything he would put on. I will go at the end of the service and shake your hand and get like a picture with you because I think just you're like glittering. It's magical, it's fun, it's a team you want to be a part of. And I think I was so invested in leaders and because they were doing good things for God. The appeal was they wanted to be great for God, and I wanted to be great for God. It was never humility that I was attracted to in the type of leaders that I followed and the type of pastors I wanted to be under. It was always their appeal to greatness. And I think part of that is how I'm wired, being a go-getter and achiever, but I think also that comes from just, again, kind of having a coach my whole life, being an athlete, and kind of viewing athletics in my spiritual life and where I want to go in the same context, which I think got really dangerous. And so I think the enemy latched on to, again, the lies I believed about love, singleness, me, and then the other part is, hey, I feel like if the enemy was talking to me, he'd say, hey, you blindly trust leaders. You follow them. They say jump, you say how high. But will you follow Jesus like that? And so I think now I really realized my commitment was more to a person and a pastor and a brand than it ever was to the person of Jesus Christ.
Um, where do you think God was in all of this?
Oh, that'll get me. Oh, God is so kind. Man, I just feel like God loves me so much. And I felt like He just had these little moments along the way to be like, Cam, like, I want to help you. And this is not forever. And you're not going to be stuck in this forever. And um, the day that everything like blew up and came public and everyone found out what had been happening, it was on Valentine's Day of all days, and my boss pastor had asked to meet me like at a secluded location. I went to meet him. It was somebody's random property, and before we even really got to even talk while we were there, a man in a truck came up, and he had told my boss, hey, you need to leave. And so he left in his car, and then my boss called me and said, hey, you need to leave this location. And I called this guy Angel Man in the truck. And when I walked to my car, the man in the truck was like, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know who that man is. I don't know if he's married, but he obviously doesn't care about you very much if he's willing to leave you out in the middle of nowhere with a complete stranger. He's like, people get murdered out here. Like, what are you doing out here? This is not safe. And I think God used little things like that to be like, man, you are in a bad situation, and this person doesn't care for you at all. This person you think cares for you and loves you, this person does not care about your life. This person is not for your good. This person is not for your ultimate flourishing. And I feel like God used that guy and just different friends to be like, I'm going to get you out. And it took me a long time to really see how God was at play. But I think looking back, I really believed I would have married somebody who probably was really concerned about power and probably really concerned about money, and someone who is probably has a lot of narcissistic traits that hasn't healed from their past and their trauma. And I think I probably would have been a part of a church for the rest of my life that is really person-centric, leader-centric, and not Jesus-focused in the grand scheme. And I think that God was kind of slowly showing me, like, hey, these are the byproducts of when we put a person on a pedestal and when we don't put the Holy Spirit as the chief leader and shepherd. And so I think God was with me every step of the way, and I think he used a really horrible person's choices to show me, hey, there's a better life for you, and these people aren't going to provide for you anymore. I'm going to provide for you, which is what led me into being a freelance photographer and God being my ultimate provider.
Yeah. Do you feel shame still?
I don't think I feel shame for what happened. I think I can say I could get into details pretty vividly, and I think I would feel sad, but not shame, because I said this earlier, but I really do believe that any woman that's ever experienced this, and I've talked to so many women that have had my same story, people that are younger than me and older than me, and again, I think the way that God has created us is to be known, pursued, especially as women, and to be taken care of. And so I think I don't have shame for that. I think I have the most shame around believing that, man, all these people cared for me, and they, on the back end, realizing, man, like, they didn't care for you at all, but you would have died for them, and they don't care about you. And so I think I feel the most shame that I fell for the leaders' attempts to care for me when it was really in their best interest and not my best interest. So
I think one of the things that is so sinister about shame is that it keeps you in the dark. It keeps you from being able to share, talk about anything. It's been 3 years, which is not that long. How have you found freedom from shame? Because, you at one point you talked about you didn't even know how to view the situation. Was it abuse? Was it not abuse? Was it like, how much is this my fault? All of that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you did feel a ton of shame.
Yeah.
So how did God set you free from shame?
yeah, I mean, I could say a few different things, but I remember thinking, man, you know what? This could have been an affair, and let's say that it was an affair, and everyone and their mom believed that. If I would have done that, if I would have been the pursuer, I think I came to the realization that everyone can think that about you, and according to the scripture standards, I'm infinitely worse than that. I am destitute, I am desperate without God. And so whether I'm a participant in an affair or I'm a victim of clergy abuse, the grace of God is for me, and this is what the cross is, and this is, man, like, this is the story in every gospel. Jesus touches and someone, like, is healed. It didn't matter if it was something that they had done or something that was done to them. And so I think just having those stories being brought to mind and the power of Jesus, I think it started not to matter for me what the story is, and how it comes across to people, because at the end of the day, God's power to save is for any and every story. The only contingency, for grace is that you would come to Him, and He will. There's always a seat at the table. There's always a seat at the table for those who are humble. When I switched churches and found healing somewhere else, the first day I met the pastor at the new church, he said to me, just a scripture that said, God gives more grace to the humble. And I know that you've had to be super humble, like, throughout this situation. And so I just felt like, okay, I have probably, it feels like a bigger pool of God's grace than I have, ever had before. And so, yeah.
Um, was there a specific story in the Bible or a specific word that God gave to you that really like gave you hope in the dark place? Like after everything happened and your life was just kind of chaos.
Yeah. I think there's two stories. There's one in Mark 5 when Jairus comes to Jesus asking to heal his daughter. And Jesus, on his way to go meet Jairus' daughter, meets the woman who had the issue of blood. He heals her. He gets to Jairus' daughter, and everyone's like, she's dead now. She's dead. Like, I don't, what took you so long? And I felt like God helped place me as the little girl in this story of, it felt like everyone was weeping and mourning and crying around me like, Camryn's dead. Camryn has nothing else to offer. And then Jesus is kind of looking at them laughing like, do you not know who is here? Do you not know who you asked to come and heal you? And I mean, I get chills even now because, sometimes, again, I think it's true for that you can be healed in one touch, and then sometimes it takes a lifetime. And for this little girl, Jesus, got her alone in a room. And, with one touch, she was healed, and he told her to go and grab some food. And so I felt like God was just like, Camryn's not dead. She's just sleeping. She's just sleeping, and I'm going to wake her up, and I'm going to give her the food she needs to survive and to think again and to have joy again. I mean, I had never experienced depression or anything like that until this happened. And I was, again, depressed, having suicidal ideations, and just the joy was ripped out of my life. I was someone who was so hopeful for the future, and I had no hope for my future. And I felt like today, even though I still have all the ups and downs as one would, but I feel like God has restored every ounce of joy, through Him, not through anything other than Him. And so I think that story, and then Ezekiel 34 has been probably the biggest piece that has given me a sense of peace and hope. And it's in that story that God rebukes the failed shepherds in Israel. And He looks at the shepherds and says, you have not strengthened the weak. You have not bandaged the sick. You have used the sheep for your own gain. You've skinned them to wear their wool. You have not tended to them. And I rebuke you for that, because I gave you a role as a shepherd and you failed. And now I'm coming in as the chief shepherd. And God, I myself am going to take them, put them into a new land. I'm going to give them food to drink, water to enjoy. I'm going to clothe them. I'm going to give them newness because you have failed to do so. And so I just feel like that gave me the peace I needed to know that God hates what happened to me, and God hates when any Christian harms another Christian. But Jesus is unlike any shepherd that does not leave you better than they found you. And so I think Jesus identifying Himself in my life as the one that would shepherd His flock with justice really gave me everything I needed to know that, man, I have a God who is for me and who is intimately aware of what I went through, and He wants to make it right.
How did you not leave that situation hating the church as a whole?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I had grown up reading the scriptures, so I was really familiar with what God is like, and I think I had a supernatural ability during that time to not put the face of Christians that had hurt me on the face of God. I think I had to make active choices in that process to, again, be like, Jesus is unlike these people who are kicking me out of their church, who are telling me I can't live with them, who are don't even want to look me in the eye anymore, people who don't treat me like a human being, like worth dignity and honor. I just had to believe that Jesus is the embracer of the broken. I think that was the only choice. And I think the suffering actually made Jesus to me more real because I think I really was able to see. Because people will say, I can't believe you stayed in the church. I can't believe you're still a Christian after what happened. And I know I had some choice in that, but by and large, I would say, man, God's hand held on to me. And that I don't feel like I had any strength left to even grab onto his garment, honestly. I just felt like God was like, no, she's mine, and I'm not going to let her go. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Um, when all is said and done, you go through this crazy kind of storm, come out of it. What what truth do you hang your hat on? What is the when all is said and done, fill in the blank. Through your life of yearning for God, yearning to do things for God, yearning for marriage, having those desires twisted, thrown into the fire, going just like all over the place, and you're kind of 28 years later or in your life, what do you know to be true?
Yeah, I think I just would hang my hat on Jesus is the only pure and trustworthy one. And that my only hope for a better church and and to believe that people can be good again, I think I have to believe that Jesus is purifying his people and his church, and that he never brings these things to the light to embarrass, um, but always brings things to the light to heal and to bandage the wounds, whether you are the abuser or the victim of it or whatever it might be. Again, God's grace is for everyone who would come to him. And so, yeah, I would just say that the only hope is to only look to Jesus and not put the face of uh, sinners on the face of God. I think it's really easy to think, oh, well, everyone's a sinner, so like it, you know, we can just do whatever we want, or God doesn't really care. But I think, I just think God cares a ton. And he, again, has very specific instructions in the scripture and very specific words in the scriptures for how he wants his church to look like. And I think we have a long way to go. And it starts with me. I have to continue to pursue um, I need to run away from anything that is selfish ambition or vain conceit, because it's really easy in the church for me to, how much can I serve? How much can I do this? And now that I don't want to work in ministry again, I can serve with, for me, a true purity of heart that's just out of an overflow of what Jesus has done for me. And I don't need the name tag to justify my love for God.
That's good. I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's just, yeah, it's a lot, but
Yeah.